Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see so many of you here. Let's start off with a quiz. I think is probably the first thing to do. For how many of you is this the first live opera performance you've seen? Can I have a show of hands? Very good. That's absolutely, what on earth has possessed you to come here? You must be mad. And those of you who didn't raise your hands then, has anybody seen more than 5 productions of operas? Just a smattering of you. Okay, well, I'm going to pitch what I'm saying at those for whom this is their first experience. I have to say, for me personally, newcomers, novices, as the night is called, are the best sort of audience we can get. I'm just going to talk a little bit about opera in general, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the production that you're going to see this evening. The purpose of this really is to try and sort of demystify and welcome you into coming and watching a live performance of opera. The word opera is just the Italian word that it just means work. It's the same as where we use the word operator or operation, operator. It just means a piece of work. There's nothing more clever than that. And what opera kicked off roughly in the 17th century. So it's relatively young, not as young as film. But not as old as theatre, and not as old as troubadours. And it sort of sought to marry the world of the troubadour and the world of theatre. So what you have is music drama. The difference between opera and music theatre, or quite often people ask me, what's the difference between opera and music theatre? There's only really one proper difference, which is the style of singing. Opera singing was evolved to enable singers to sing live into a theatre with a whole load of musicians playing down beneath them and still be heard. The whole classical style of singing is simply to be heard. Opera singers are never amplified. Whereas with musical theatre singers, nearly always musical theatre singers are amplified. So when you hear the singing tonight, just know it's not amplified. That said, there is one exception this evening, and my challenge to you is to see if you can spot there's one bit of singing which is amplified electronically. It's not in the first half. I'll give you that much of a clue. And as with music theatre, the idea is that many of you will walk around. You'll put the radio on, or you'll play something on a headphones or wherever. And we have music inside us and around us so much of the time. And music has that ability to capture sort of what's going on inside, probably better than anything else we've quite found. I mean, most forms of art are an attempt to try and express our inner selves, the inner life, as opposed to the one that we share with other people. And opera's no different. And the music that you'll hear tonight works in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's supporting the words that the singers are singing. Sometimes it's telling you, the audience, something different. So the singer may be saying something that's quite aggressive, and underneath you'll hear music that's quite soft or mellifluous or loving. And so you start to get a feeling of the complexity of the human characters involved. And that's all we're trying to present. And what we're trying to present to you is to try and find the detailed, nuanced human life that the music and the text together can communicate. The piece you've come to see tonight, those of you who've seen opera before, how many have been to see Don Giovanni before? A few of you. Okay, good. So Don Giovanni is one of the most performed operas ever written. It's written by Mozart and composed by Mozart, and the text was written by a guy called Lorenzo da Ponte, who was a cheeky bugger of the first sort. He took on the title Abbe da Ponte, which he got from one of his sponsors, and he was a womanizer, a gambler, a drinker, a crook. And he hooked up with Mozart, and between the two of them, this little partnership, wrote sort of 3 of the top operas ever written. And if any of you are coming here thinking that Mozart is hanging around on some huge, high, inaccessible shelf of high culture, you need to correct that opinion now. He had a very dirty sense of humour. He was full of life, full of humour, full of vitality, vulnerability, warmth, kindness, rage. He spent a lot of his life fretting about belief. He spent a long time with the Masons, who at the time, in the 18th century, were quite involved in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. They weren't just a social organisation, there was a spiritual aspect to the Masons. So these two guys who wrote this were both very, very vibrant characters, and if you wanted to go for a raucous night out that would probably end up in a prison cell somewhere, these were the two people that you'd want to go out with. And the piece, Don Giovanni, is based on, it's the Italian word, what you're seeing tonight will be sung in Italian, but there will be, just between me and the cow up there, you haven't spotted the cow up there, it's not real, don't worry. There's no other rest of the cow behind, over my head here. You'll see above there will be projected a translation of the text, so you can follow the words in English up there. They took the basic story of Don Juan. We've all heard of Don Juan, the lover, and there's some old plays that it was based on. But it was also based on another character from the 18th century, a guy called Casanova, who many, I'm sure you've heard of, who again was another womanizing, gambling, hard-drinking crook, who also happened to invent the national lottery. Casanova roamed around Europe, seducing elderly countesses who'd lost their husbands, and many who hadn't lost their husbands, but were probably about to. One of the things he did is he sold the idea of the national lottery to lots of little principalities in Europe. It's also reputed that he set up the first trades union with the people who built Blackfriars Bridge in London because of their appalling conditions. It's rumoured that Casanova, as he died, forgive the language, but it's merely fact, a pox-ridden old man in Bohemia, that they found a copy of the libretto of Don Giovanni with his note saying, I never did that, this is a fiction. But a bit of Casanova's life was also involved in the writing of Don Giovanni. The piece itself is, it's the story of a man, Don Giovanni, who we meet at the very beginning, and we see 3 of his escapades with 3 different women. We hear from one of the characters, Leporello, his sidekick. There are quite a few thousand others. What we see, though, is basically the last 24 hours of Don Giovanni's life and what he does with these 3 women. And we discover that with Don Anna, the first person we encounter, we don't know exactly what goes on. We don't really see what's going on, and it's a source of massive speculation. But clearly there's some sort of coercion has taken place in some way, shape, or form, but we don't know exactly how. With Donna Elvira, we see a young woman to whom marriage has been promised and who is desperate to bring Don Giovanni to God and to marriage. And there's also a young woman, Zerlina. It's the morning of her wedding to her fiancé, Mazzetto. And she, because a rich man comes to her and promises her all sorts of things, says to her bridegroom, bugger off. Leave me with him, it'll be fine. And there's a slight sense that she's like a little female Don Giovanni herself, that she's trying to take advantage of whatever she comes across. So we see these 3 encounters, and as the piece goes on, we discover, we see the consequences of those, particularly as they relate to Don Giovanni. The alternative title of the piece is Il Dissoluto Punito, the dissolute, the rogue, punished. And I don't think it's giving away too much to say that Don Giovanni does get his comeuppance at the end. But the piece has a lot of very interesting manifestations, not least because of the way Mozart's mind worked, the way Da Ponte's mind worked. And they didn't simply see it as a matter of, here's a man, he does nasty stuff, let's punish him. There's distinctly a whiff in the piece that all these individuals involved in their encounters with him, to one extent or another, suffer from some sort of level of hypocrisy. And there's a whiff that what Don Giovanni leaves behind him is a group of people whose lives have been turned inside out by his exposing of their own hypocrisy, of their own lives. So there's a moral complexity to the piece, which isn't just nasty man, slap. It's much more than that. There's something about the way that he is with these people. Somehow, he seems free from the normal social conventions. And he seems to be able to cut through those and to be able to tell people who they are in a way that's very disarming and sometimes disrobing. So during the course of the evening, a thing that amused me on the programme, it says Novice Night. Now, I know you know a little bit about the story, those of you who didn't know. I kept on seeing it saying Novice, which, of course, would be a fairly disappointing version of Don Giovanni if there was no vice. Any of you of a delicate moral disposition know the sort of evening that you're in for. And you may be able to see this is the set behind me. This is specifically designed for Don Giovanni by Nate Gibson. And you can probably tell that you aren't in an 18th century inn. We're in a contemporary setting with the piece. For many reasons. The moral complexity of the piece is best conveyed, I think, through characters that you will recognise. Particularly at the moment, the United States is in a very interesting position morally. There's a very strong conservative element in the United States asserting its morality in the public forum. I think this piece really talks about that and about sometimes, not always, of course, the hypocrisy that may lie behind such an assertion of correctness and righteousness. The piece deals with that. So we felt that a modern version would enable us to convey that better. It also means that we can use modern bits of costumes so that you will, from the clothes I'm wearing, you'll have made certain assumptions about me unthinkingly. If I'd walked on in a black suit with a dicky bow, you'd have made other assumptions without even thinking about it, because we share the code of costume. We share the code. If I get my phone out, you know what this means. And again, oh, is he doing social media? What's he doing on stage? He's giving a talk. But you understand these gestures. You understand the prop. This means that we can communicate to you much more effectively by using a modern setting. It's simply that simple. The other thing, of course, is that when Mozart and da Ponte wrote it, it was a contemporary piece. It was written to be contemporary. And you could argue, and I sometimes do with purists, that by setting it in contemporary times contemporary for the audience, we are being more faithful to Mozart's work than by setting it in the 18th century, because he chose to set it contemporaneously. So, the world that you'll see, Nate and I, what we wanted to do was to have a piece that flowed through the evening. So you'll see we go from one scene to another. The scene changes, dovetail, they change from the end of one scene into the next. There's not stops between scenes because we want to keep things going. We're all used to watching film and TV where edits move things on very quickly. And I'm sure you'll all be very keen to get to the bar by the end of the evening as well. So rather than delay things and keep things moving, we want to make sure that the scene changes move on. So you'll see, for example, you'll see a couple of characters walking around wearing construction worker outfits. The sort of person that in everyday life construction workers disappear. You'll see in this they have a quasi-supernatural air because they seem to be setting things up to bring about Don Giovanni's fall. The other thing that we're playing with is sometimes scenes taking place in different spaces. I mean, I don't think I'm giving anything away to say that, maybe this might be a restaurant, possibly, that we're alluding to here. And then over here, you might make guesses about the sort of space we're in here. But again, there's a street light there, vents, rubbish bags. It's not because we've left the theatre untidy, the rubbish bags are part of the design. So you're looking at a space now which has two spaces in it. There's an inside space and an outside space. And you'll also see there's this wall which has an aperture in it, another one over here. So you can see through from one place to another. There's a Hopper painting, Nighthawks. Some of you may know the painting Nighthawks. That's one of the inspirations for the design, is that idea of seeing into a life from outside. And with Nighthawks, again, it's a life which is clearly not settled, let's say. And you'll see as we go through, the space changes and flows as we go through. I'm not going to tell you much more about the story. Hopefully you'll be able to, if we've done our job properly, you will be able to read the story, get a sense of the story from what you see. And I might say, you should perhaps worth you knowing, the singers that you're going to see this evening performing for you, the fantastic thing about Clonter Opera is it provides an opportunity for singers who are between training and profession. So some of the singers you see are still in training. Some of them have finished their training, but they're sitting on that bridge. It's a terribly difficult time. Any of you who've been through that time of life when you finished education, you try and look for work. it's one of the most difficult times of life because nothing seems like it's ever going to fall into place for you. And what Clonter offers is an opportunity for these singers to practice their skills in a professional environment with a professional conductor and director and designer. Just to give you a feel, most of the singers, again, not all of them will have completed that. On average, professional singers train for about 7 or 8 years. So they'll do undergraduate, a bit of postgraduate, and then postgraduate specialisation, and then maybe a professional course at another place. So we're at the level of architects, doctors, in terms of the training, because the subtlety of the requirement of classical singing is very, very demanding. They also have to be able to sing in Italian, French, English, German, quite often Czech and Russian. They need to have a word. They can't speak those languages particularly. Some of them can, but to be able to sing in them is a particular thing. They also have to learn the physical and acting skills, which you'll see on display tonight. So what you're seeing is singers at a really exciting part of their development, where they're just moving into the profession. For some of them, in fact, I will say for some of them, this is their first full performance on stage. So you are very privileged. It's a really big moment for people in their lives. It's a fantastic thing. And again, that's down to this place, what Clonter Opera offers developing singers. I need to wrap up, I think. So just one other tiny little thing. There's a lot of nonsense around opera. That it's culturally distant, that it's I hate to use the elitist word, but it's the first word that comes to mind while I'm talking now. All we're trying to do is to tell you a story through music and drama. That's all we're trying to do. And all we ask of you is that the only qualification we ask of you is that you're a human being. It's all it takes. You don't need to know anything. You don't need to be clever. You don't need to be informed. You don't need to speak Italian. You don't need to read music. You don't need to be a singer. We simply ask that you sit and watch with an open mind, and you may find sometimes it moves you. You may find sometimes it makes you laugh. Please feel free. It's absolutely fine. But that just to assert that the simple joy of an opera performance is storytelling through music. I do hope you enjoy this evening. I'll be pottering around. Feel free, if you see me and you're burning to ask me a question or to shout at me, that's fine. All of that is possible. That's absolutely fine. I'm very, very happy to talk to people as I go around. For me, I love talking to our audiences. It's a really important part of making it open. Perhaps the very last thing I should say is this is, in fact, effectively our dress rehearsal. So again, the Novice Night is opened up to you. So again, other exciting things on offer are things might go wrong. It is live performance. Some things that might go wrong might be deliberate. Who knows? You'll have to be the judge of that. I do hope you have a lovely evening. I'll see you hopefully during the course of the evening. Thank you all for coming very much.